spoilers, I am Adam. I know I'm behind. I've been busy. I'm trying to get through Koromon because I've been meaning to do a review of that for like a month now, and I'm working on it. There's The Flash. There's The End of the Girl from Plainville. I understand all of that needs to get done. I did see Petite Maman today, the French movie. We'll talk about that in a minute. First and foremost, I would like to take a minute to speak about the death of George Perez. News broken a little while ago. I mean, not too long, maybe like 2-3 hours ago. Titan of the industry. The week that, we've seen his work on screen, and we've all come to know what he's done. I mean, his work on all New Teen Titans, or New Teen Titans, in the 70s was a seminal work, and then to follow that up with Christ's on Infinite Earths, and then to go over to Marvel and then also do Infinity Gauntlet on top of that. Just a titan of the industry, and it sucks. Is it the same week as Danny O'Neill died last week? I actually picked up one of his books today from my mom, a collection of not for him, not specifically his work, but I picked up a collection of Archie comics because that's what he did before he broke ground on Batman. He was working for Archie, and he was doing the Archies. My mom's a huge fan of the Archies from when she was a kid in the 60s. So I got that for her Mother's Day gift. I got her a collection of them. So, two massive figures in the industry to pass in 1 week. It's a huge loss. And we would not be, this week I would not have done a lengthy review of Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness if it were not for the work that George Perez did way back in, way back in the 70s and 80s. Because we wouldn't have the Maxi event. I mean, the Maxi event in comics would not exist if it were not for the work of George Perez legitimizing it with Christ's on Infinite Earths. I mean, the granddaddy of all of the, comic events. So it's a huge loss for the industry, and to die so young. He was only 67 years old, and the circumstances around it are very sad. He will be missed. So, yeah, I just wanted to address that. I didn't want to not address that. If you get the last week, I didn't address Danny O'Neill. I wanted to give him his propers, especially considering how much we talk about his work. I mean, how much of what he does, how much of what he did does reverberate even today. So, yeah, I just wanted to, put that out there too. And, it's just sad all around. Yeah, so I don't know what good segue out of someone dying into a review of a movie, besides the fact that the movie is also about death, which, I didn't intend to do that. I was actually in line at Newberry Comics I went into Newberry Comics to get, I was looking for Death of Doctor Strange #5 to get bagged and boarded, because I had a feeling, and if I have advice for anyone out there, that issue could rise in value. That's what I would assume. I would assume that Death of Doctor Strange #5 is going to become a commodity within the next 10 years, considering how much the value of Miss Marvel #1 and Thor #1 have risen now. I mean, you can hold on to it past, when it starts to rise in value, because, right now I think, Thor's going, I think I've maxed it 125 for a CGC 10. But I think that if you get on average, you can get 45 for it, or it's worth 45, which means you bring it to a comic book store, they'll probably give you 20. But still, if you pay 5, that's a huge return on your investment. But I think there's a good chance that this comic, because it involves it's the culmination of the event, and then at the end of it, Clea becomes the Sorcerer Supreme. I feel like there's a chance that comic happened for a very specific reason at this point in time going forward. And within the next 5 years, I think we will see the death of Doctor Strange in a movie, and then Clea taking over as Sorcerer Supreme. Just putting it out there. Might be worth... I mean, look, if you're going to spend $5 on a comic, worst case scenario, you read the comic, and then, if you like it, you keep it. If you don't like it, you throw it out. I mean, or you can just hold on to it, and, maybe 5-10 years down the line, you can get a nice 40 for it. Not a ton of money, but it's money nonetheless. So I was in there, and I was looking for that, and I couldn't find it. I mean, I don't know if they got rid of all their copies, or if they sold out of all their copies when it ran originally, or if it was everyone else who saw Multiverse of Madness this week thought that who knew about the comic thought the same thing I did, and were just faster and got there before me. I didn't think to ask, but what I did find was I found that collection of Archie comics for a Mother's Day gift. So I bought that instead, and I'm standing in line waiting, and I'm looking through, my news on comicbook.com, and I see, people paying tribute to George Perez. I'm like, oh, well, there he is. But before I was, in the comic book store, on Free Comic Book Day, because today is Free Comic Book Day, I was seeing Petite Maman, which is a French movie that it came out in France last year, and it just made its theatrical stateside debut this weekend. And it's not going to do tremendous numbers because Multiverse of Madness came out this week, and that's going to eat up a lot of it. Plus, we're in week 3 of The Bad Guys, which I've heard is not terrible, and I've heard I think there was another kids movie that came out recently too. I don't know, whatever. But look, I'm not saying that it's not gonna put up huge numbers domestically. That's all I'm saying. In France, it made 1.3 million. I read, which is not terrible for a small release. And the thing about Petite Maman is that it is very, very short. It's one of those things where I sat down in the theater, I looked at my ticket, and I was like, this isn't right, is it? There's no way this is right, because it says an hour and 13 minutes on the ticket, and I'm like, there's no way. It's gotta be a typo. It's gotta be 2 hours and 13 minutes. And no, sure enough, hour, 13 minutes, movie over. Cool. I'm not complaining about a short movie. I'm always a big fan of the short movie. If you can get me in and out in an hour and a half, I love you. I've said that multiple times. I should get it made onto a t-shirt. If that's going to be what this movie, if you can, in an hour and a half, tell your story, get me in and out, and have me feel fulfilled having seen the story, and I mean that in a, you're telling the story, and the story, hits everything it needs to, all the character arcs feel fulfilled, and everything kind of works. It is, you have done your job as a creator. So the thing with this movie is that, it's an allegory. Any allegory, it doesn't have to function on 2 levels, but typically the surface level is not the one it is going to work on. The idea of the movie is that there's a little girl who, her grandmother dies. She's 8 years old, her grandmother dies. Her and her mother go to her grandmother's house to clean it out, and while playing in the woods, the little girl discovers her mother as a little girl. And because she discovered her mother as a little girl, they start, playing, hanging out, and through this, the two of them can process the grief that comes along with the grandmother's death, because the little girl lost her grandmother, the mother lost her mother. So they can process the grief together that way, and it's an interesting exploration of grief. And I think that there definitely is a broader conversation to be had regarding the exploration of grief in movies in a post-COVID era, or movies that were made during COVID, exploring this specifically. Because look, it is not even a national trauma. It's an international trauma where millions of people are dying, and we aren't able to grieve the way we normally do, because of lockdowns and all of that. It was shattering for a lot of people, for the way that, the world changed in that time period. So looking at it, through that lens, it's like, that's why we're seeing a lot of this now. We're seeing a lot of exploring, dealing with death, dealing with, being the survivors of death. And some of it came about before we were even at this point with COVID. We were getting to this point with, major tentpole releases, because, I hate doing this. We're talking about, other movies, but, Black Widow is a similar thing, and then continued into Hawkeye with the survivor's guilt of having to do with, Black Widow's sacrifice in Endgame, where it's this idea of exploring what happens. And then, the entirety of WandaVision, the Multiverse of Madness, is Wanda grieving, and it's, and processing the trauma that comes with death. And it's one of those things where when we watch movies, we're seeing reflected back at us the world we're in. So the fact that these things are happening all around us and it's being reflected back at us in this way, it is kind of interesting to see it play out in that way. I think that's one of the things with this movie. Now, going back to what I said with the allegory, is that, the little girl says she's from the future at certain points in the movie, explaining to her mother, the 8-year-old version of her mother, that, oh, I'm from the future, I'm your daughter from the future. And I think that the thing with that is, the way I saw it was, my read of the movie is not that the little girl is actually time traveling. I see it as the whole thing is kind of a figment of, it's more like a fantasy than a science fiction. And I think that, it's one of those things where, if you read a fable by, Aesop or Hans Christian Andersen or something like that, you don't start pulling at the strings hey, wait a minute, rabbits can't talk. You don't pull at those strings. And I think that, to sit here and pull at the strings of how the semantics of it work is more indicative of a society that's willing to, nitpick to death for internet clicks, rather than take the movie for what it is as a whole, as some of its parts, rather than rather than looking at it, looking at it in pieces rather than the whole. And I think that's a problem with film analysis as a whole now. And it's why every day you see articles about plot holes in this, and it's it's not really a plot hole. It's a plot hole in that moment, but if it's later explained, it's not a plot hole anymore. So it's just one of those things where it's we're seeing this, and that's the kind of thing. And I think the movie works very well. And I think that the little girls who are in the movie, who play the two 8-year-olds, they do a fantastic job in the role. They are, they're endearing to watch. And the two of them playing and being kids is what makes the movie work. Because if the whole thing is about the two of them processing what happened, that's what makes it work. It's kind of if you saw Turning Red, there's that sequence in Turning Red where they go to the bamboo garden, and May sees her mother at her age, and then helps her mother through what happened. It's about breaking the cycle of abuse and all of that. And the idea that, it's kind of similar to that, but without an abuse cycle, where it's seeing where the mother comes from and accepting that as part of her, and seeing what causes that is an interesting and powerful tool to see done. And the director of this, whose name I should have written down, but she also directed 2019's Portrait of a Lady on Fire, which was amazing. If you haven't seen that yet, go to Hulu and check it out. It is so worth your time to watch that movie. It is so well done. And this movie is, just another one of her great, her great works. This director, whose name I'm forgetting, and I feel terrible for it. But yeah, if you have not seen Petite Maman yet, you can go and see it in theaters. It's going to be a limited release. It's not going to be a major theatrical, but I'm assuming it will be. Oh, nice! That's not a turning lane, asshole. But it will not be it won't be in theaters for long. But it is worth seeing if you do. So if you go to Hulu or something and you find it on Hulu, which I would assume where it's going to end up, so that's where a lot of foreign movies recently have ended up. Flea ended up there, and then also Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the previous entry from this director, ended up there. So if it's going to end up somewhere, I would say probably what's it called? I would say probably Hulu. But even if you watch it at home, it is worth your time to watch this movie. It is very well done, very entertaining. So we'll wrap up there for today. Tomorrow morning, I'll probably do The Flash, and then go off in Plainville next week, and then around Monday, and then we'll be reasonably caught up. And then under the banner of having we got to catch up on too. But then after that, we will be reasonably caught up in everything. So that will be, where we are after this. So we also have Koromon, the video game, which is going to have a review impending. And then there's also going to be a review of, there's another game I just picked up. Oh, Bug Snacks. I picked that up for the Switch, so we're going to be trying that out too. I've been playing that a little bit. I'm enjoying it. It's a puzzle game. It's pretty cute. But we have those two. If video game reviews start picking up and I can start getting companies to send me free video games, we'll be covering more of them. But it's just the financial aspect of covering a video game is the cost inhibitive part, where it's like, oh, well, I bought Bug Snacks. That was expensive. Look, I bought Koromon, and that was expensive. And when I bought, what's it called? Like, if I were to buy, like, Rogue Legacy 2, which is the other game I was looking at, like, that would also be expensive. And then, Dune Spice Wars, if I want to cover, that would be expensive, too. And we just did, on top of it, we just did, like, a Star Wars Skywalker Saga, which was really expensive. So, it's one of those things where, like, we have to get to, it has to be, cost not inhibitive. That's why movies and TVs work so well, because there is no, it's not cost inhibitive to cover those things. So we'll wrap up for today, and we'll be back with more later this week, and a new theme song for, a brand new theme song just for video game episodes. So until then, have a great rest of your week.